This is a dragonfly, and this is also a dragonfly. One fits in your hand, the other had a wingspan longer than your arm. So what force in Earth's past could turn harmless insects into airborne giants? And why did that world vanish? Let's open that door, without stepping on anything. Prehistoric Earth was crawling and flying with titans. Dragonflies the size of hawks, centipedes longer than your couch, millipedes as thick as drain pipes. But here's what makes this bizarre. These weren't rare mutations, they were normal. Entire ecosystems pulsed with oversized arthropods as if the laws of biology had changed. And yet today, the biggest insects barely reach the length of a child's shoe. So something else had to be happening. To uncover it, we need to go back 300 million years into a world built on fire, forests, and an atmosphere that didn't play by modern rules. Imagine breathing air so oxygen-rich it feels thick in your lungs. That was the Carboniferous Period. Oxygen levels reached 35%, compared to today's 21%. Every inhale was practically turbocharged. Why does this matter? Because insects don't breathe like we do. They don't have lungs. They pull oxygen through tiny tubes called spiracles, tubes that don't scale up easily. With more oxygen in the air, those tubes could stay the same size while feeding a much larger body. But there was a complication. If oxygen alone explained the giants, modern insects in oxygen-rich labs would balloon to prehistoric size. They don't. So something else was amplifying the effect. Carboniferous Earth was hot. Not volcanic chaos hot, but sauna hot, greenhouse hot, wrapped in a blanket hot. Heat changes biology. Warm temperatures accelerate metabolism, speed up growth, and allow cold-blooded creatures, including insects, to thrive. Forests dominated the landscape, towering plants pumping oxygen into the air while trapping sunlight at the surface. But the surprising part? Heat shouldn't make insects larger, it should make them smaller, because overheating becomes a serious risk for big bodies. Yet the fossil record disagrees. The giants appeared anyway. So something even stranger was in play, something that changed the very rules of survival. Today, insects live in a world of predators. Birds, bats, reptiles, amphibians, mammals, layers of death from above. But in the Carboniferous, none of these predators existed yet. Flying vertebrates hadn't evolved. Reptiles were still tiny newcomers. There were no birds, no bats, no airborne threats at all. In the sky, insects were alone. And that opened the door to gigantism. A dragonfly could get enormous without worrying about agility, stealth, or escape speed. It could simply expand into empty ecological space. But this created a problem they couldn't solve forever, because evolution never leaves empty thrones unattended. And soon, something new arrived that would change everything. Around 100 million years after the reign of giant insects, the world changed. A new predator appeared, giant amphibians, and later, early reptiles capable of hunting insects on land. But the real shift came later, with the evolution of birds and bats, fast, maneuverable aerial hunters. Suddenly, the advantage flipped. Everything that had allowed insects to grow huge, oxygen abundance, warm climates, open skies, met its opposite. Now, size became a liability. Being big meant being slow. Being slow meant becoming dinner. So insects shrank. But even predator pressure alone wasn't enough to erase the giants. Something more fundamental was changing. Something in the atmosphere itself. Near the end of the Carboniferous, Earth's oxygen didn't just drift downward. It plunged. From 35% to around 25%, and eventually toward modern levels. To a modern animal, this is a mild inconvenience. To insects with tiny breathing tubes, it was catastrophic. Oxygen availability caps their maximum size. Less oxygen means smaller bodies, much smaller. This atmospheric crash didn't just downsize insects, it forced many of the largest species into extinction outright. Yet even after this crash, some insects remained unusually large. So what allowed those survivors to push the limit? That answer lies deep inside their bodies. Insects wear their skeletons on the outside. It's like living inside your own armor. But armor comes with rules. The bigger you get, the heavier the exoskeleton becomes. Get too big and you collapse under your own weight. Giant Carboniferous insects skirted this boundary because the air was denser due to heat, giving more lift for flying giants. Forest canopies were thick, providing stable air currents for gliding. And oxygen levels were so high that molting, shedding and regrowing the exoskeleton was easier and faster. But as oxygen fell and climate shifted, molting became slower and riskier. A giant bug stuck mid-molt is an easy meal. So natural selection nudged species towards smaller, more efficient bodies. However, there was still one more missing link in this puzzle. A force of nature that turned the giant's world upside down. Literally. The Carboniferous ended with a collapse of massive swamp forests. Climate patterns shifted, glaciation expanded, and the lush world of oxygen-pumping plants dwindled. As forests shrank, oxygen crashed even faster, and with fewer towering trees, the warm, stable airflows that helped giant insects fly began to disappear. Now imagine a hawk-sized dragonfly in a colder, patchy, turbulent sky. It struggles to lift off. It burns more energy. It crashes more often. Smaller insects thrived, larger ones faltered. But that still doesn't fully close the loop. Because even after all these shifts, oxygen, predators, climate, there's one last secret that locked giant insects firmly into the past. Today's world is ruled by two forces insects can't defeat: gravity and scale. Gravity hasn't changed, but what it means for flying creatures has. Modern insects rely on rapid wing beats and extremely fine air currents. As bodies grow, wing area increases slower than weight. Lift can't keep up. Even if we cranked oxygen back to Carboniferous levels, today's insects couldn't simply scale up. Their breathing tubes would fail. Their wings couldn't generate enough lift. Their exoskeletons would buckle under their weight. Predators would destroy anything sluggish enough to get large. But Carboniferous insects lived before these constraints fully kicked in. They existed in a rare window of Earth's history when atmospheric chemistry, climate, ecology, and physics aligned in their favour. It was the perfect storm for gigantism, and like all storms, it eventually passed.